this type of commission about housing or private houses in my office, I think is really important. In fact, as a young architect and a young office, we began with small houses for some friends of friends, not exactly friends, because it's difficult to have a friend to do a house. But we have begun the studio more or less with 2 houses. We began some 5 years ago, more or less. And then for us was a good moment to try or to work with the houses project as a way of investigation for another scales. So sometimes we have been working in some construction of houses, and sometimes we were doing some competitions with bigger scale projects. And then these things was, these houses were more or less giving us ideas how to work in a bigger scale. We found that, for example, one of the best ways to have a dialogue between the contemporary architecture and the place is to talk about the void, to talk about the emptiness. So how to build the void is a good way to put in a relationship the abstract things, the contemporary architecture, which is a box, is really abstract, really close, etc., with the place. Then how you work with the emptiness, like the sculpture or the ether sculpture, that we can see here in different models, how we work on that. For example, with this kind of models, where we try to avoid this idea about windows. We don't have windows as a whole, we have the windows as a volume, because you don't have 2 dimensions, you have 3 dimensions always when you have a void. So the windows never are in the planes, are always in the corners. That was a good idea, because this space was this idea that a window or a door is not a plane, it's not a surface, it's a space. So for us, this space that was the empty space of the project was in charge of putting a relationship in a dialogue, the abstract and the nature. And I find how you work with the surface. So for me, in the houses, it's another kind of experimentation. That for me, it's really important to work in the houses in 2 ways. To have the sensation that you have a bigger space without having more surface, more square meters. The one is to provoke these diagonal views, which are always the longest distance. Yeah. So when you arrive to the ends, you have always this view, not this view. So you always see in diagonal way, and in this diagonal view you have longest distances, and at the same time you are defining this space that I said before, the patio between your walls and the forest. And at the same time, always working like in these small houses that I show at the beginning, working with elements. I repeat, working with this idea that a house, or the space inside the house, is like when you are in the city, that you have streets, plazas, so you have voids, and you have massive construction. So inside the houses, we work always with services areas or wet areas as a volumes. So we never distribute the spaces with walls. We always distribute with volumes, empty volumes or opaque volumes, because
create mass.
Create mass
and then depth.
Yes, and then it's again this idea about avoiding cul-de-sacs. Yeah. So you have elements that are defining different kind of spaces, but at the same time you are allowed, or you have the possibility of going around 30-60 degrees around this piece. You have an endless circulation. So this space seems much bigger than another with I don't know, perhaps 50 square meters more. So we began with a lot of models trying to work with this idea about emptiness and geometry, but we develop a lot of, at the beginning, we develop a lot of models and diagrams. And these diagrams are a lot of things, diagrams about geometries, or diagrams about geometry that exists in the place and for us are really important. But always trying to work with not bidimensional elements, always working with 3-dimensional. More or less, there are different kind of types of voids. There's this kind of void was related to the exterior, to the skin of the house. Because at the same time, I wanted to introduce another word, which is the word of scale. So the void allows you to change the scale of the buildings. For example,
can you explain that?
This is a really small house. This is 120 square meters. It's a really small house with a big landscape around the house. So if you avoid to put windows and doors, so you don't have elements that allow you to recognize the scale of the building, you lose the scale of the building. That's what happened, for example, with the sculpture of Christo and Jean-Claude. When they envelope a building, the windows and the doors, etc., disappear, and then you don't understand the scale of the building. The scale of the building are the ribs, the roofs, etc. So it's totally different. And then this is the idea about working with the void around. There are some models there that are working about the void inside, for example. As we can see here, no? So we had a quite slope land here, and then we decided to have a really close facade behind here, no? Related to the land. But then we were working with this how a subtraction or empty space could be related to the root orientation, to the views to the sea, etc. No? And then we developed a lot of models, not trying to work with this idea. So only small details, no, small movements in the patio, no, you change this idea, because always we think that the thing we'll see later in the Vescano house, we think always that it's better to see the landscape with an architectural frame, not a window, architectural frame, than seeing the landscape directly. So if the geometry of the house, that's another word that is important. No? So it's void, scale, geometry. No? This thing that we have been investigating in the houses that we introduce later in another process in a bigger scale, like this campus university in Tortosa. No? It's this idea about that the geometry of the house has to allow you to understand that you see the landscape through an architectural element. We had more or less fixed the limits, because we decided that the limits should be related to the limits of the plot. No? But the other surfaces of the other geometries should be related to the views of the forest, the views of the sea, etc. It's exactly the same that happens in this house, for example. For me, when I talk about architectural and landscape, it seems for me is something that is contextual and have a dialogue with the landscape. So it's not mimetic. We do architecture. We don't do landscape. We do architecture related to the landscape. That means contextual, and that means to understand how you see the landscape from this new point, and how you see this piece, this newer architectural piece in the middle of the landscape. So